Hey guys, and welcome to the North American Qualifying Tournament. I am Nathan, that's Admiral Zamora, joined by Robert Worthenwing and Keaton Chalky Gill here at the ESL Studios in Burbank, California. We are in our final day now of this event, and we've had 4 people move on to America's Regionals at this point, as well as 2 Latin American players. But today we're going to be finding out who our last 2 players are going to be solidifying themselves that spot in the America's Regionals.
Yeah, it's a real shame we can only have 2 players advance from this pool of players because, as we've seen all throughout this tournament, there isn't a single player in the remaining 8 that doesn't deserve to advance. They're all extremely skilled. We've seen a lot of them bring different styles, too, so it's going to be very interesting to see who advances today to the America's Championship.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing the final 2 from North America, and I'm, like you said, looking forward just to all these guys, really great players, brought kind of different lineups. I'm looking forward to seeing how they kind of match up against each other.
Yeah, and the different lineups indeed is something they're going to have to battle it out with. Last year they were using Last Hero Standing, and if they won with their class, they got to keep playing it, but this year it's a little bit different so that you can follow along with exactly how they'll be playing. We have the rules laid out for you about Conquest right here.
Conquest is a match format created for competitive Hearthstone tournament play and is the official match format for the 2015 Hearthstone World Championship. Here's how it works. Each player begins with 3 decks using a unique class for each deck. For example, a player can have a warrior deck, a priest deck, and a warlock deck, but not 2 different warlock decks. When a match begins, each player selects their first deck without telling the other player which one they've chosen to play with.
Garrosh versus Uther.
After the first game ends, the winning player's deck is declared victorious and can no longer be used, and they must choose from their remaining decks for Game 2. The losing player may choose to use the same deck they just lost with, or one of their remaining decks. This continues through Games 3, 4, and 5 if necessary. Once a player has conquered their opponent with all 3 of their decks, the match is over and the winning player advances. Conquest will be used at the 2015 Hearthstone World Championship, which has a prize pool of $250,000. Now that you know the format, try taking part in an online tournament or a fireside gathering near you.
So as that video kind of explains, Conquest, obviously very different from Last Hero Standing in that you can't just have a favorite deck that you kind of 3-0 with. You have to have a wider, more holistic understanding of the game and kind of come with a bunch of different tools. And, you know, obviously the 8 players remaining today, they're going to have to make use of all those tools if they want to advance to the America's Championship. As I mentioned earlier, 8 players today. We've seen them all over the course of this tournament. And this is it. This is pretty much, it's win or stay home and not travel out to San Francisco. So a lot on the line for these players.
Yeah, in the lower bracket at this point, you know, they fought very hard, fought very valiantly, but it's do or die time if they want to find themselves in that spot competing for the America's Championship, as well as some cash that's up for grabs.
Yeah, we've got a $25,000 prize pool on the line, you know, as well as the pride of being the America's champion. We didn't have that last year, you know, obviously, as it was basically, we had 4 players from the America's Championship advance and go to BlizzCon, but this year they're actually fighting for a title and a crown. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be really interesting. Kind of looking back at last year, we stopped at 4 players, so didn't really get a satisfying conclusion to that. Maybe Firebat would have been the America's champion and the world champion. We will find out if that can be the case for someone this year.
Yeah, we certainly will. And to kind of catch you guys back up, get to the point where you can see exactly how they've got to this point. Yesterday was action-packed. We got our first 4 players qualified for America's Regionals, and we had some upsets happen as well as some big knockouts. Alan Dang was able to knock out Amaz 3-1. He's officially out of this event, and then Firebat versus Dog. This is one of the biggest matches, I think, that happened yesterday. We had the current world champion versus Dog, who's had a phenomenal 2015 season.
Yeah, Dog got really close here, brought it to 5 games, but Firebat was able to just barely edge him out in the Druid versus Patron match, taking it in 5 games and keeping his hopes alive.
Yeah, and then Reynad versus Bloodyface. This match was trading games back and forth, and in game number 5, it looked like Reynad might have had it, you know, locked up, but Bloodyface just a couple of consistent threats and able to dominate the board as Reynad ran out of gas.
yeah, we saw Bloodyface, you know, he was in a situation where he could have given up and could have not gone for it, but he managed to save off Reynad and eventually took the series.
Yeah, and then Hot Form versus Strelzik. This is where our first regionals began, or regional qualifiers began in Hot Form. Cool, calm, and collected all series and dominant at that.
Yeah, Hot Form just taking a quick 3-0 in that one.
Yeah, and VLPS versus Luchesi. This is one of the ones I was most impressed with. You can see VLPS very calm, but at the same time, almost nervous about his games. Luchesi sent this one to game number 4, but VLPS just at the end of the day too strong for Luchesi.
Yeah, what was most impressive about the series is how well both players played. The LPS obviously ends up taking it, but I'm excited to see what else we can see from Luchesi today.
Yeah, and Trump versus Purple. This is one where Purple continued his trend that he's had for 2015, just absolute domination.
Yeah, Purple just dominating this match. Don't think people expected Trump to go out so easily, so we'll have to see what he has today.
Yeah, and Phone Tap versus Jab, the ESL Legendary Series 2 winner, facing off against Jab, who's looking for his second straight regionals appearance.
Yeah, I've been saying don't sleep on Jab. Absolutely on a tear in this North American qualifier tournament. Taking out Strife Pro, taking out Fibonacci, and now he's taking out Phone Tap. He has officially punched his ticket to the North American America's Championship.
Yeah, and I'd have to say with a performance like that, you know, a feat to make it back to the America's regionals in back-to-back years, that's one of those things that makes me think, is Jab going to be the favorite to win this whole thing?
Could very well be the favorite for the American regionals. He's definitely shown, above all else, consistency. He's been placing really well on ladder. Obviously, our first repeat of the American region. And we'll just have to see if maybe he can get it done this time, because last time, unfortunately, he stopped short.
Yeah, who do you think is the favorite in this one, though? Maybe you have some players that you're cheering for. You can use the hashtag Road to BlizzCon and tweet at ESL Hearthstone and get involved in the conversation and let everyone know exactly who you're supporting about it. Maybe there's some talk about some of the breakout decks that we've seen. Secret Paladin had been a big emerger for this event, as well as Tempo Mage kind of making a resurgence for this one. We want to know exactly what you think of the format, where it's headed, what you're doing best with. Again, get out there on Twitter and tell your friends about this one, too. This is a big event with a lot of players being knocked out and moving on today. Not all of these guys get a bunch of camera time, so it's great to let your friends know that this one's going on so that they can see maybe some of these potential up-and-coming players. Remember, it was just this time last year, very few people knew exactly who Firebat was.
Yeah, and look how well that served him now. World champion, very well-known player in the community, and obviously made the most of his tournament victories.
Yeah, we also want to take this time to thank our sponsors who made this event possible, Blizzard, Twitch, and ESL, of course. Without them, this broadcast would not be happening. And, of course, without Amazon, who's actually running a promotion for this event. You can visit Amazon.com/Hearthstone and pick up some packs at a bit of a discount. Maybe you're looking to fill out your collection or try some of these decks and play like the pros. Well, guess what? We can help you get some of those cards if you don't have them over at that website.
Yeah, if you are looking to buy packs and start building out your collection, this is just strictly speaking one of those cost-efficient ways to do so. So definitely recommend heading over to Amazon.com/Hearthstone and giving it a look over.
Yeah, definitely a real-life value play right there.
Yeah, Trump would definitely approve of that one. And so now we're going to be rolling into our first match of the day, which is going to be Luchesi versus Nias. Again, this is the lower bracket portion of it. If these guys are not winning their matches, their road has come to an end. But for the rest of them, that road is still continuing. And one of the biggest points of talking for me in Nias all week long is that he is not running Warrior at all in his lineup.
Yeah, we saw he instead opted to bring that Dragon Priest, and I've been very impressed with Nias' play in general. He's kind of one of the more stoic players. We've seen him obviously have his camera on. He's been in bad situations, but you don't see him freak out. You don't see him start panicking. He just, continues to push forward his game plan, and I'm very excited to see what Nias can do here. I definitely think Luchesi is a very skilled player, but I think Nias is more than equal to the task of advancing.
Yeah, Trump and Nias, both the only two players in this tournament to bring no Warrior lineups. It served them pretty well up to this. They're only a few matches away from securing that regional spot. Nias actually dropped down to the losers bracket fairly early on in this tournament, just round one, and he's battled his way back to be here today.
Yeah, to be undefeated since that point, I certainly think is a big deal. Both these guys are going to start out with Druid. Honestly, this feels like a relatively safe pick. Maybe feel out where the opponent's going with this one. What do you think the big difference in this matchup is? Luchesi, he's actually got a copy of Sludge Belcher in here where we don't always see. What does that kind of indicate to us, do you think, Chalky?
Sludge Belcher is definitely one of those cards that even when it's not being used for defensive utility, the body on it's pretty solid. It offers pretty solid value just for the 5-drop. It's not the most aggressive 5-drop you can play, but when you're against something like Hunter or that Secret Paladin you mentioned earlier, it can just serve to help further stabilize you in the mid-game.
Yeah, I want to point something out. Neither player has in their hands either Darnassus Aspirant or Wild Growth, so normally we've kind of been joking over the weekend that it's kind of a race to Druid time. Oh, there we go. Nias is actually going to make the leap to Druid time. Luchesi still acting in, what I assume is PST for him. But.
Yeah, he's going to need to get out of that real quick with something like an Innervate or a Wild Growth. Maybe that Darnassus Aspirant, like you said, but if he doesn't get on the board pretty quickly, I mean, Nias could just run away. And because of that, he's even just going to play out this big game Hunter just to get something out there.
Yeah, and I like that. Obviously, Nias doesn't have anything out with spell power. He can't just look to Wrath Cycle for 2 damage, so he's going to have to address that, or, you know, if he ignores it, it will allow Luchesi to possibly challenge something like a Shredder that comes down, or even a Savage Combatant, which has been a more popular pick for this tournament.
Looking like he's having a tad of trouble with this one. If he's going to cycle a Wrath, I think it's pretty darn likely he chooses to cycle the second one. Maybe wants to hold on to it for utility. Either way it goes, you know, both these hands a little bit clunky, I would say, right now. Not a lot of big tempo plays being made, just kind of fighting for the board and seeing who ends up on top. And Nias is going to favor that option instead. What do you think is going through his head right now?
Yeah, I think Wrath is one of those really underrated utility cards in this matchup specifically. You really don't think much of it. You're like, I'd rather have a random card in my deck, save some health. But things like this piloted Shredder and later down on the line, just having that extra damage just to supplement your minions in the fight for the board can really go a long way. Like here, Nias could even innervate it out, having drawn that innervate, or he can save it for later to help contest the board.
Yeah, and what we kind of see here is Luchesi's behind in the mana race, but he just keeps throwing things down on board. Obviously, he went with that tempo big game hunter, but he wants to make sure Nias is forced to constantly deal with something. So if Nias does just elect to play down the Druid of the Claw here and not pop the innervate to Wrath the Piloted Shredder, there is going to be something on the board that Nias is forced to deal with. So I like this play, and it looks like with the Wrath, I would expect to see the innervate here for either the Drake or the Druid of the Claw, depending on what comes out of the Shredder.
Yeah, a couple of these drops would not make Luchesi too happy, and I have to say it's one of them. His hand is pretty darn empty right now. It's just kind of a wasteland until he starts rolling into that turn 8, turn 9 situation.
Yeah, Luchesi probably not happy to see a Druid card pop out of that Shredder, especially, you know, Druid of the Saber, but at least it's thematically correct. That's kind of, obviously not a huge point, but I like it.
No, I think that's a very big point, man.
Yeah, Druid of the Saber, look, she's come because you're a Druid player, so.
Yeah, it's nice for Luchesi, though. He can still deal with it and stay relatively even going into an Emperor turn, which will help him, you know, get that mana reduction, kind of acting like the Wild Growth that we already saw from Nias this game.
So both players still fighting for the board, and that's a pretty darn big pick up, dust off the hands a little bit. Nias, you just pick yourself up 2 cards and a 5/5 body.
Yeah, that was really great timing for that Ancient of Lord up here. He had the coin sitting in hand. Luchesi's got a really solid turn 6, though, here, obviously. The power of Ragnaros comes down, and that's going to make Luchesi's hand a little bit more flexible. I would not expect in any universe for the Emperor Thorson to stay alive, but, you know, for Luchesi, when he didn't get Wild Growth, Tharnassus Aspirant, this will allow him to kind of be a little more flexible in what is in his hand, though.
Yeah, and we're actually looking at Nias potentially deciding to go with Piloted Shredder over something like Azure Drake. Cost less mana, so you're a little less mana efficient, but he really just wants to get the best minion stats he can on the board. He thinks he has enough cards. You know, he's already piecing together things like a combo with the Savage Roar, and he just really wants to get power out there. Might opt to go with the card draw, though. Really debating this one. What do you think the merits of both are, Admiral?
I think playing at this point, playing under curve is probably going to be a little bit better. Like every single turn, I feel like Luchesi has to keep investing mana into answering the board. You find yourself in a great spot, and this is one of those benefits of playing Azure Drake. Is you get a draw like this one, you get massively rewarded. I'm sure that's not what the tiebreaker for his was, but again, just thinking about the mana constraints, if Luchesi's continuing to invest in answering what you're doing, that gives you one more opportunity to stay ahead, and what better way to do that than to play more mana efficiently and draw a card at the same time.
Yeah, this is unfortunate for Luchesi. He's sitting on a 7-mana combo, but he might just have to use it to clear off the board because 5/5 and a 4/4 that gives spell damage, that's just too much to leave alive. And
this is an EU clear right here.
This is very, very much not what Luchesi wants to be doing with this reduced mana combo, but he does get to push 2 damage at the end onto Nias's face. I don't know, Nias, clear board here, but yeah, he's got a lot of options.
Yeah, and this is the kind of situation I was just referring to. If Luchesi's forced to combo in a spot like this, not only does that give initiative back over to Nias, but now he's also down that big burst combo.
Yeah, we see the combo came out, and Luchesi did manage to clear it, but it's not as if he's in a better spot. Nias just immediately refills the board. Yeah. Admittedly, smaller minions, but you know, obviously any minions on the board for the Druid, that's dangerous for the other player because the combo could have come out on that turn.
Yeah, now the combo can come out. It's not quite lethal here for Nias. He could set Luchesi to 2 and break through that taunt. Might go with a silence, or maybe he's just clearing off with the damage.
Well, that Emperor Thorson draw, I think, is really going to make an impact on this board. Now, I'm curious, if he chooses to silence this Druid of the Claw, is he susceptible to a second Force of Nature Savage Roar? Like, is that something he actually dies to in this spot? 2024? No. I'm counting like 1 damage short of that.
Yeah, he would be 1 off without an Innervate, but Luchesi has gotten 2 Emperor reductions still in his hand, so Nias has been paying attention to that. There is potential. Luchesi got both those pieces reduced. His hand was just all combos, and he has that extra mana to hero power you.
Yeah. Kind of depends on how safe Nias feels like playing, and we see he is going to play reasonably safe. And, you know, putting down that Keeper of the Grove, he also had enough mana to drop down Emperor Thorsan. He's got the combo in hand, so this is one of those things where he's probably trying to force Luchesi to address the Emperor Thorsan as opposed to push for damage. And, yeah, obviously with Nias in hand, if those 2 minions stay up, that's going to be game.
You know, and looks like Luchesi is in a moment of desperation at this point. Not effective tools to clear the board, not really effective ways to answer anything. And Druid, you know, one of the things it wants to do is be able to consistently fight for that board. It doesn't have a lot of come from behind tools. So with this Ancient Lord, not even a lot of things in his deck that he could draw is going to climb out of this one. Yeah,
and I mean, if he goes for that draw, like you said, not many cards. Those definitely aren't it. And now he will be dying to that combo from Nias.
Yeah, so game number 1 is going to be picked up by some maybe a little bit of edge from Wild Growth, but I think Luchesi did a great job fighting for this one. Understood early on that he was going to have to put up a fight, even played turn 3 Big Game Hunter, but in the end, Luchesi having to play defensively and Nias getting to play on offense, he picks up the first one here.
Yeah, you mentioned the opening up with the Druid is one of those things where you feel safer because Druid doesn't necessarily have any straight up bad matchups. It has a lot of matchups that it can just win based on kind of like how it maneuvers, how it places itself, and, you know, if it gets that combo. And the risk, obviously, is that when you play into that Druid versus Druid mirror, a lot of the early game kind of sets the pace for how the rest of the game is going to go. As you said, Luchesi very intelligently puts down the tempo Big Game Hunter, and it served him well. It's just Nias was able to just get more and more of those mid-game drops out, and Luchesi, you know, was forced to use combo pieces to clear the board, but he never really got that foothold in the mid-game.
And so what do you think at this point, Chalky? I mean, we saw Luchesi play yesterday as well, and it seems like he's been having to just kind of fight from behind in every single one of these situations, but it feels like he's making some great decisions. What do you think the big difference is in that one? Why is he finding himself in these situations where he's constantly on defense?
Well, I mean, I think one big thing about, you know, professional Hearthstone is really anyone can win if you give them just the perfect draw. You know, you draw those Wild Growth innervates at the perfect times, you can probably win that game. What it really comes down to getting your edge to become a professional is, how do you win with those average hands, those below average hands? Can you get yourself a way to win the game? And I feel like Luchesi's a player that really tries to find that edge and give himself a place to win the game.
I think that's excellently put. So Nias is going to go with Warlock in game number 2, and Luchesi sticking with the Druid in this one. You know, something that really struck me from Nias when I was watching his play, when I saw that this was a handlock and that he had a priest in his lineup, he strikes me just as a control kind of player. Wants to take it to the late game, wants to have a lot of tough decisions throughout the middle of the road. Is that kind of the same feel that you get from watching him play?
Yeah, Nias obviously by bringing the Priest. Priest is a deck. Dragon Priest obviously is far faster than Control Priest, and it is capable of just beating down opponents with kind of these minions that have lower attack, high HP. But yeah, Nias definitely strikes me as more of a player who likes to have a lot of cards, figure out these tough decisions, and kind of advance his agenda from there. Luchesi, we see, you guys were talking about winning with average hands. Luchesi actually opens up with a pretty great hand, and he had a number of decisions he could have made there. Opting for that turn 1 Innervate Shade as opposed to Innervate Coin Shredder because it played so naturally into the Aspirant and then the Shredder on the following turn. Nias does have the Dark Bomb to deal with the Shade, though.
Yeah, and something I've seen a lot from Luchesi just in all of his Druid games is when he gets that Innervate Shade option, he's going to go for it, and we've seen him attack very aggressively with them. You see he kind of deflected the Dark Bomb pressure over to the Shade instead of the Darnassus Aspirant. Lets him hold on to that coin, maybe get out a combo a little earlier. We've seen aggressive Druid pushes really work out against Handlock. We saw Purple just, you know, go all face yesterday and 3-0 his way into regionals. So maybe you're looking for Luchesi to do the same.
I love what Luchesi just did. The Void Caller comes down for Nias, and Luchesi just assumes that if that Void Caller dies, something he doesn't want is coming out. There is nothing good for Druid to handle. Nias has the Hellfire there, but Luchesi just keeps pushing face, and Nias is already down to 14 health, and we look at what is in Luchesi's hand, again, kind of playing to your strengths, and Luchesi has Swipe, he has Force of Nature. Obviously, the Harrison is probably going to be more body, especially now that Jiraxis is on the board, but Luchesi is definitely playing to what he has in his hand.
From here on out, you look at this board and you think, I have a 2-3, my opponent has a 3-15. You're not going to win by playing board control.
No.
So from here, I mean, would you really be surprised to see plays like Force of Nature, Face, maybe just look to double swipe your opponent out of this game?
No, especially, you look at Luchesi's next turn, he'll be on 6 mana, he can Force of Nature. Turn after, he'll be on 7.
Yeah, and I feel like that Ancient Watcher is a really big pickup. I mean, maybe otherwise Nias would have gone for the Emperor and been a little more vulnerable to the Force of Nature, but now he's behind 2 huge taunts, sitting pretty healthy at 12 health.
Yeah, you could see actually prior to this turn, Nias, if you just took a look at his body language, it felt like he was a little bit nervous despite the fact that he had gotten that Jiraxis out because his life total was so low. But now he's landed this Defender of Argus, and again, with that Ancient Watcher pickup, look how calm he looks all of a sudden.
Yeah, I think he's definitely in the driver's seat. I mean, his health is super low, but when you have 17 health points of taunt on the board, you can't really be feeling too bad.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. At this point, it's just going to be a matter of how does he start breaking through this board and where does he make his headway afterwards,
Yeah,
even considering life tap.
I was going to say, he was summoned over the Owl, too, like he might have just silenced the Sludge Belcher and just decided to start pushing for damage. Nia's probably giving heavy consideration to what he can actually, you know, have to silence later. And for Druid, realistically, now that Sylvanas is kind of out of a lot of decks, there's not necessarily something that screams, I have to silence this in Druid. Maybe Druid of the Claw, maybe Emperor Thaurissan, but, you know, he's got his board to the point where Thaurissan isn't really maybe a huge consideration because Luchesi's down to a few cards, one of which is the coin. And, I don't know, maybe you're just not necessarily worried about it at this point with as much taunt as he has.
Yeah, I mean, Nias is now kind of in this dangerous zone where he's entered a place where he could realistically lose to double swipe. So I'd like to see him kind of identify that and say, okay, I don't really need a life tap. Let's play it completely safe. I mean, multiple players have lost to just crazy stuff like double swipe. It's one of those things where you're like, all right, they probably don't have it. So could see life tap come out and just instantly lose him the game. I don't think we'll see it this turn, but something to consider.
Yeah, I think if...
oh, okay, yeah, he Mortal Code, but I saw the reticule just briefly on... I'm like, no, Nice, don't do it. You're so young. But yeah, Luchesi still kind of sitting there left. Now, Emperor Thaurissan is a pretty interesting pickup here.
Yeah, I mean, this feels like this could potentially unlock a world of possibilities in the right circumstance. I mean, the Emperor certainly is a lot better for Luchesi than it is for Nias. I think even in a situation where Luchesi's is coming out second right now.
And Luchesi, once he Emperors these swipes down to 3 mana, with the coin available to him, giving him 10 mana, a Keeper of the Grove off the top would be 10 points of damage.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Yeah, he's putting himself in a position, too, with those Force of Natures to be able to kind of hold off some of the damage if he needs to buy more time. Nias' hand, not all that great, honestly, against what Luchesi has on the board. The Defender of Argus can definitely be big to taunt up those things, but he doesn't have an ancient, or he doesn't have a heal bot. You know, he doesn't have stuff like Jiraxis because it's already in the board to gain health. Nothing that really allows him to heal. So as you pointed out, Chalky, he's going to have to identify that he can't life tap here. If he does life tap, he's obviously putting himself in the position for right now, really the only way he loses this match.
Yeah, and I think he'll identify that. I mean, we saw it last turn, went for the Mortal Coil instead. He's got a really healthy board. He's pushing 13 points of damage. He can maybe set himself up for a 2-turn lethal and just make a big push to end this game without life tapping.
Right, now Luchesi will be on 9 mana with the coin next turn, so he can use both Forces of Nature, which may help him to kind of clear out the board somewhat to kind of buy himself more time to possibly get into that Keeper of the Grove, but this Defender of Argus coming down is going to spell a lot of problems for Luchesi.
Honestly, I got to agree with you. I think the 2-turn push is really where his thought process should be right now, and it looks like he agrees with you. With this much taunt pressure up, wow, he's actually going to trade the Twilight Drake. Don't have a problem with that. A 5-2 into a 5-5 isn't the worst deal ever. And it still, you know, still sets him up pretty decently. I mean, it's kind of tough to lose this point to anything other than 10 points of direct damage. Is that really what he's considering at the moment?
Yeah, I really would have liked to just see Shadow Flame out of him. He's going to leave that 3 mana hanging this turn, 100%. So holding on to Dark Bomb, shipping that 5 damage with the Twilight Drake to face sets you up for 100% lethal next turn. It has to be Keeper of the Grove off the top here, though, for Luchesi.
Oh, and that's, yeah, he can't even, unfortunately, Wild Growth there to cycle a card because he's only at 9 mana. We see the Force of Nature come out, and I think he's going to just do some clearing. Again, he has to kind of keep Nias from just killing him next turn.
Yep. So for Nias, he's only going to have access to 10 damage on the board plus 3 from the Dark Bomb. He'll be quite a bit shy, and that'll give Luchesi, you know, open the door for him to, again, maybe top deck something to win this game.
Maybe this Mortal Coil picks up an antique heal bot. I certainly think he's looking for a heal at this point. And second Iron Beak Owl will give him some extra damage, but still not far enough to push for lethal. Luchesi's going to have one more draw.
At least.
Yeah, at least to pick up Keeper of the Grove. Living Seeds also would be able to take this one down.
Yeah, Living Roots.
Yeah, Living Roots, I'm sorry. 2 damage is all he needs.
Yep. Not sure if he runs that card, but that would be another draw.
Let's see. Savage Roar here would allow him to clear a lot of the board.
He has the combo option with Big Game Hunter as well, so he could clear off a lot of this board. It would allow him to kill both the taunts and the giant. Would go down to 10 and be facing down 2. So maybe that's a play we could see.
Right, and we talked to, Chalky had mentioned the idea of just using the Shadow Flame before. Obviously, it doesn't help him too much against the Force of Nature as the trees die at the end of the turn, but maybe there's a world where if this game drags out longer, that Shadow Flame still being in hand could actually really be huge for him.
Yeah, for Luchesi, he really only has 1 minion to ever develop on this board, so kind of going back to that turn, that was pretty much do or die turn for Shadow Flame. If you don't use it there, you're probably not finding an opportunity. Luchesi's actually going to draw with Wild Growth, maybe try to pick up something like Living Roots. But no.
Double Savage Roar. That's interesting.
I feel like you have to Big Game Hunter now.
So he's going to go for a different setup on this lethal.
He's going to set up the combo lethal.
Yeah, he wants to set up a double Savage Roar turn.
Oh my gosh, he has the mana with it for coin.
Yeah, this is actually really smart from Luchesi because this is so hidden as well. He just saw, Nias just saw Force of Nature. Like, he's got a life tap for something, and I don't even know what saves him in this spot.
He needs... yeah, I don't know if there's anything to save you against double combo, but if you're Nias, you have to be thinking about single combo. I mean, that would kill you.
Sunfairy Protector's... Well,
Sunfairy Protector is going to give him a little bit of taunt, but he doesn't have huge things to taunt up.
Right, so he can play a Void Caller, he could play down the Big Game Hunter.
Yeah, and I mean, that's about it. You probably have to either Dark Bomb or Shadow Flame off this Big Game Hunter. Again, Shadow Flame lets you hold that Dark Bomb for damage, and you're going to need to start pushing and killing this Druid before he compiles that combo damage.
I mean, that should... Is that it, though?
Yeah, that's
probably
it.
just it.
Yeah,
that's it.
That's going to be 1 6-point damage, or 1 6-point treant from Force of Nature. Luchesi playing purely to his outs, holding on to direct damage almost the entire game, facing down massive taunts, whittles them away, and then 1 giant burst.
Something to point out, though, that Void Caller could bring down Mal'Ganis in Luchesi's mind. That's why he hasn't done it yet.
Oh my gosh, you're absolutely right.
So Luchesi probably will end up doing it because he has to go for it, but... I mean,
you could not... He's trying to see if there's a way you can kill Mal'Ganis and win the game. I feel like there probably just isn't.
How crazy would this be if he doesn't do the combo here because he expects...
No, you have to go for it, I think.
Well,
100%.
So if he Force Nature Savage Roars and it's just the 14...
he still want to...
Yeah, he still has enough to push through for lethal.
Yeah, he's going to get lethal because there's no Mal'Ganis.
I'm sad we don't have Luchesi on camera. I would love to see his face when Mal'Ganis doesn't come down.
Here's the thing, is that playing it this way allows him to also kill Mal'Ganis if it comes down because he has a 2 mana for that wrap.
And save the Savage Roar.
And save the Savage Roar.
He wouldn't win the game, so there was no way for him to guaranteed win the game through a Mal'Ganis drop. But he had the option to, like you said, kill off the Mal'Ganis and hold the other Savage Roar.
Wow, really, really well played by Luchesi. That was kind of crazy. As you said, he played exactly to his outs. He obviously had a win condition in mind, but it was one of those things where he got that Ancient of Lore, he drew some cards, he looked at what he had, and he's like, all right, what can I do about this? I'm just going to keep stalling as long as I can. He didn't panic and just throw away swipes or throw away Force of Nature, and he set himself up to tie the series.
Yeah, it felt like super impressive play. I mean, that was nigh perfect play, I'd have to say. I mean, I don't think there was a single spot in that game where you could say Luchesi had misstepped.
Yeah, I think he played remarkably well. From Nias' point of view, I feel like Nias was maybe playing towards that Healbot draw, towards a Mal'Ganis draw. Didn't get either of those, and we really saw kind of the not pressuring Luchesi enough, gave him just enough time to set that lethal push up.
Yep. And so now, tied up at 1 game apiece, Luchesi is he's working with some more aggressive builds at this point. He's got Patron and he's got Hunter left. And Nias looking to kind of stave off this early pressure and take it to the late game where he has stabilized the board. But this is a matchup, Chalky, I know you found yourself in quite a few times. Talk to me about what the big difference in this matchup is. Like, where does the Hunter find its major win rate?
A lot of this matchup comes down to pressuring the handlock in a way that they just don't have enough mana to deal with it. We saw in the Trump match yesterday versus Purple, he could have gone for maybe a lethal push where, sure, your entire board dies to Hellfire, but then your opponent can't heal, they can't taunt, and you just win the next turn. That's a play line you really have to be looking for in this matchup. Just pushing as much as you can, making it so they don't have the just mana to deal with what you're doing. So we'll have to see how Luchesi goes about that. For Nias here, this is obviously not the matchup you wanted to see. You have Priest left, which obviously does fine against Hunter, and Handlock does fine against Patron, so kind of a mismatch here for Nias. Still definitely in this one, though, and he needs to find out how he can go forward to win this exact game.
I kind of want to touch on the fact Hunter is a class that in Hearthstone, obviously, there's been a fair amount of complaints over the years that Hunter feels a little too strong or a little too powerful, but there is a lot of technical play required at the highest levels to be a really good Hunter player. And watching Luchesi play this yesterday, it really struck me, as someone who has obviously played a fair bit of Hunter myself, that there are many, many ways without even realizing it. You can actually just kind of throw away the game in one turn by not making the exact correct play, especially against Handlock, where you have a very slim window to kind of lock up that match. And if you misplay it, Handlock just heals up, they put up taunts, and then that's just the game.
Yeah, Hunter, I think, a very forgiving deck because of the amount of damage it possesses. Sometimes you can make mistakes and they get masked by how powerful the deck is. But, there are times where, again, you make that one small little misstep, suddenly you're finding yourself in a spot where there's nothing you can do about it afterwards.
Yeah, this really goes back to kind of those perfect draws versus not perfect draws. When you have the perfect draw, you can make a few mistakes and still get the win. But when you have exactly enough to get there and you make a small misstep, suddenly you're not getting there. And especially against a deck like Handlock with Molten Giants, with taunts, heals, you really have to be very aware of all of that and how it interacts with the damage you're doing.
We saw Nias earlier choose to silence the Mad Scientist, obviously looking to keep whatever he plays down on the board. And now he, because he's not having to deal with a freezing trap, he can basically make use of that Twilight Drake to trade and clear out minions with impunity. Whereas had that been a Mad Scientist that made a freezing trap, he would have put down a Twilight Drake and it probably would have gone straight back into his hand.
Yeah, I feel like this is a pretty darn good position for Nias, honestly. He's down to 20 and he's facing some pressure, but with 2 Antique Heal bots, a Defender of Argus, 2 Ancient Watchers, and a Jiraxxus, and a Molten Giant, there's a lot of work that Luchesi's going to have to do if he wants to win this game. And it's sort of like you said, Chalky, you have to give them not enough mana to deal with everything. That feels like the one thing Nias has right now is the time.
Yeah, Nias has all the cards you would want to beat a Hunter. He has taunts, he has heals, he has Jiraxxus, he has a Molten. For Luchesi, he doesn't know all that, but he needs to kind of maybe assume worst case and think, how do I make it so my opponent just can't even play all that in time?
Right, we see here he opts for the hero power. He was probably considering, as you said, kind of worst case scenario. Do we expect Molten Giants to come out? And yeah, putting Nias at 11, that means it's basically free Molten. It's Molten time.
Yeah, it's exactly enough to play it with Argus.
Yeah.
And I think it's what he was considering, too, is do I even hero power? Do I put him this low?
And the problem is everything else in Luchesi's hand was damage. So it's kind of one of those things where he was either going to float mana or just go for it. And I think in this matchup, Chalky, obviously you'd be the expert here, but I think at some point you just have to go for it. You have to make them have it.
Yeah, I think Luchesi's made the read on this hand. He thinks, okay, well, I've got a lot of damage, so maybe I can just burn him out even if he has Moltens. And if he doesn't have Moltens, then I just got maximum damage and I'm probably going to win anyway. Unfortunately for him, Nias had both the Molten, the Taunt, and he's got the Heal bot to back it up. So, I mean, just trying to burn your opponent out here probably won't work.
Yeah, and I'm sure if he was watching how much mana Nias had, he was probably thinking, steady shot, could you maybe just do 1 damage this turn? Like, why can't I just call back some of that damage? Because obviously a 2-mana Molten Giant would have made all the difference.
Oh, no. I'm dealing too much damage with my hero power.
Oh, and, wisely, Luchesi rolls Huffer. So, playing Huffer, always a smart move, as we've touched upon. He played Leok earlier. Maybe the first misstep in Luchesi's series, but, this time he corrects it, plays Huffer. And unfortunately, though, Huffer... Maybe not. I don't know, actually. Is Huffer what you want on this board right now, staring down all these taunts? It is 4 direct damage to one of these taunts.
Yeah, I think Huffer is definitely what you want because something like Misha or Leok lets your opponent dictate whether or not they want to trade into it or maybe just ignore it, maybe Shadow Flame it off.
Ooh.
Huffer gives you the choice of whether you want to push the damage in. Obviously, since he didn't put it into a taunt, it wasn't something he wanted. He would have much rather had Misha or Leok, but I'm surprised he didn't put it into the taunt. Maybe just thinking, okay, I can't beat a heal bot, and there's a heal bot.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of his plan here is just to hope that maybe Nias missteps, and that gives him just that one small window he needs to push through. But with 9 points of damage crashing in and plenty more back behind that, and a second Defender of Argus, I don't think Luchesi's going to have what it takes to get through this game. And it's all because Nias has just had what it takes to fend off this kind of pressure and really begin an assault.
Yeah, the Hunter window in this matchup, You know, we saw Luchesi put him at 11, and that's basically the state where at 5 mana, as the handlock player, you're thinking to yourself, well, I've got the answers, or I don't have the answers. And Nias had answers in spades. I mean, even if he didn't have the Molten Giant and the Defender of Argus, he could have just heal-botted up to reasonably... Obviously, you still need to get rid of the minions, but he could have gone back up, you know, by 8 health, so he would have been in a reasonably safe spot. And Luchesi, as you said, elected not to put the Huffer into that taunt, and I don't know. He didn't really play around Shadow Flame or Hellfire there. Obviously, Luchesi is an incredibly skilled player and knew what he was doing, but yeah, Nias was able to just trade those things out, and it ended up being kind of the same approximate result because of the fact that Nias did the trade and didn't Shadow Flame at that point. But yeah, Luchesi's going to go ahead and concede it up, and Nias is going to take a 2-1 lead in this series.
Yep, I think at this point, Luchesi's got to be feeling the heat on this one. I kind of like his playing this one as well. You know, this is the other side of things too. Not necessarily just playing your outs, but playing just some of sort of the more obscure ways to win as well, where maybe your opponent just missteps and doesn't attack the right minions, and suddenly that opens up a window of opportunity. Say that Nias goes all for Luchesi's face, he draws Iron Beak Owl. Maybe that's a way to push through.
Right, I think he was maybe going for all that stuff. Nias played it pretty well, locked out all of the options, and set up an exact lethal with just the Molten Giant. So at the end there, Luchesi had really nothing to stop that. Just had to concede it out, and now he's going to have to take a win against the Priest with not only that Hunter deck, but also Patron.
Yeah, I think it's also worth noting that, in my opinion, Handlock versus Hunter is actually one of the more difficult matchups to navigate in general, because there's arguments for pretty much every play you're going to make in the scenario Luchesi was in, and at the end of the day, you just have to identify the line that works for you and what you expect to win with.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's just going to be a difficult way to do it every single step of the way. And despite getting the matchup that I think he wanted, Luchesi does find himself at that disadvantage. But now Dragon Priest, this is a deck we have not seen a ton of in this tournament so far. I think a lot of that has to do with power level of the deck. So Chalky, talk to me about this matchup. What do you think Dragon Priest has, and is it going to be enough to pick up this third final win?
Well, we saw Nias actually is heavily teched, not only this Priest deck, but some of his other decks against things like Patron Warrior. He has not only Harrison Jones, but Acidic Swampoo's as well. Shadow Word Pain for things like Gnomish Inventor or Acolyte Pain more specifically. And so he's really just going to look to kind of lock the Warrior out of options, kill off weapons, kill off card draw, kill off Patrons if they're made, and just make it so that Warrior really has no way to win.
Yeah, we see Nias opens up with Worm Rest Agent, which is one of the most annoying things Dragon Priest puts down early, especially if it's activated. A 2/4 with Taunt for 2 mana. It's just kind of annoying to get through. The Warrior is obviously able to if he wants to, but it's going to cost him maybe a little bit more in terms of resources than he initially wants to expend. That said, Luchesi can just kind of choose to ignore it for a bit. He goes ahead and just shield blocks, and you know that's kind of just going to allow Worm Rest Agent to just put in some chip damage, but it's not the end of the world for him.
Yeah, so looking like he wants to get this Twilight Guardian out. This is something else I think Dragon Priest can do extremely well, is actually start the pressure when there isn't any being applied on the other side of the board. And, you know, this isn't something we see from Priest very often, is the ability to just start, you know, punch him in the face and get the damage done. But with Nias going turn 2, turn 4 taunt, turn 3, 3/6 taunt, I think Luchesi's got to be a little bit concerned about this.
Yeah, these are minions that Patron Warrior can't just deal with easily. I mean, Luchesi has 2 copies of Execute in his hand, so going to be able to deal with anything that gets too big. But really what Nias is just going to look to do here is pressure the Patron Warrior enough so that they have to do things, and then shut down those things with cards like Acidic Swampoo's and Shadow Word Pain, which he kept in his mulligan.
Yeah, we see Luchesi's plan so far has just been to continue to kind of move on that Patron agenda of just digging for cards, cycling into what he wants to find, but he isn't addressing the board. And a 3/8 Drake, obviously he's got Execute, but if he doesn't want to save his Execute, maybe thinks he wants to save it for something like Ysera down the road, it's going to be really difficult for him to deal with.
This is actually kind of a funny spot, because Luchesi, to me, kind of is striking me as he's looking at this 2/2 and going, is it okay that this is on the board? Do I want this on the board right now? Which is kind of a funny thing to think about. You know, Priest doesn't have a lot of burst damage available to it, so kind of taking some hits from these minions isn't the biggest deal in the world. Sure, it starts to wear on your life total a little bit, but I think from Luchesi's perspective, maybe he feels like he has the time to just leave these around until they become a liability.
Right, and we see, because Emperor's in his hand as well as Patron, maybe there's even a world where Luchesi's thinking, all right, maybe I just let these live for like 2 or 3 more turns, put down Patron, find a War Song Commander, and just start throwing Patrons at him. As you said, that damage is not piling up quickly. And Patron, despite being a combo class, has the ability, or a combo deck, has the ability to start like stockpiling armor. And maybe Luchesi's even kind of saying, hit me, go ahead and knock me down sub 30 health, so if I get a Battle Rage, I can even draw more cards.
Yeah, and for Luchesi here, I mean, he has the option. Could start going for patrons now, but they'd obviously be challenged by what's on board. And kind of the more obvious play is you just slam down Emperor. It's turn 6. You have pretty solid Emperor cards in your hand with the double Whirlwind, the Execute, but maybe that's not something he wants to do quite yet. Wants to draw into more combo pieces, Warsong Commander, Frothing Berserker, things like that, and really start getting the combo started.
Right, we saw him briefly thumb over Execute there, maybe considering even a Whirlwind, just to get rid of that 3/6, but if he does that, he's not going to have anything against Ysera, which I believe Nias has shown in this deck already. We joked around the other day when he drew 3 Ysera Awakens, but he does have Ysera in this deck, so it's something Luchesi has to consider if he doesn't really start pushing his own agenda pretty soon here.
Yeah, I think Ysera is one of those cards that Patron Warrior, if the game gets that late, it might be to the state where doesn't have taunt. I'm just going to ignore it. It's only pushing 4 damage a turn. It can draw those 5 damage spells like Ysera Awakens and Nightmare, but more than often, it doesn't. And so it's low pressure. You can ignore it, and it actually adds damage to your big Whirlwind combos. I am surprised here, though, because Acolyte of Pain really seems like the perfect target for Shadow Word Pain. Admirable, what else would you really be looking to Shadow Word Pain in this matchup, if not that?
Well, it's kind of, I think there's 2 real ways that he's looking at this, which is number 1, can I handle the number of cards that Luchesi is going to have? And if so, am I worried about Acolyte of Pain? The answer, obviously, in that situation is no. Now, the second one is, can I handle a big Grim Patron Assault? And with Holy Nova in his hand, I think something he actually might be able to do, given the texture of the board right now, is clear all but 1 full health Patron, Shadow Word Pain that one, and then recover the board state with that Holy Nova. So if he's holding on to it, I have to believe that's really the only circumstance where he's really thinking about what this Shadow Word Pain actually does.
Right, and we saw that Luchesi last turn opted to not play the turn 6 Emperor Thaurissan, and I like that he's showing a little bit of restraint here. He's looking for those key cards that he wants to get discounted by Emperor Thaurissan, whereas, you know, we've seen in most of the games so far with Patron, if they have the turn 6 Emperor Thaurissan, the player respectfully just kind of looks at their clock and goes, oh, it's Emperor time. I'm just going to play down Emperor. Instead, it looks like he's choosing to go ahead and address some of the stuff on the board, which can't fault him for. That 5/4 kind of kicks it up a notch in terms of how much damage he's taking a turn, so he's going to go ahead and get rid of some of that stuff.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Luchesi is almost close to being a Warsong and a Frothing away from maybe a potential lethal push. Now that he's picked up that unstable ghoul, he'll have the Emperor cost reduction, so few cards off. Doesn't really have any card cycling right now, though, and Nias is piling on the pressure.
Yeah, it looks like he just wants to pressure indeed. You know, Acidic Swamp Ooze, this is one of those cards you typically want to hold on to for Death Bite, but when you got this much damage pouring in, I mean, maybe this is just as good a time as ever. Luchesi's fallen to 15, and without a ton of ways in his hand to really take care of this board position, this may be too much.
Yeah, Nias has extra damage in his hand. He's going to be presenting lethal. I mean, right now he has 16 on board, so armoring up in Luchesi's mind would take him slightly out of that. But with Shadow Word Pain, Velen's Chosen, Holy Nova as options, I mean, Nias can probably just push right through.
Yeah, and I'm sure Nias is aware that going into next turn, he has the option to just Velen's Chosen into Holy Nova, which with the Azure Drake on the board is actually a 4 damage area of effect spell. So even if Luchesi kind of throws down some patrons or something, or just makes some stuff to kind of distract Nias from, you know, going face, Nias can just clear it. Nias can just get rid of it. He can give something bonus attack. He is in a great spot right now, and the onus is on Luchesi to try to stay alive, because if he loses this match, that's it for him as far as his road to the Americas Championship.
Yeah, and I actually don't think Luchesi has a reasonable play that lets him live. He's going to rope it out and consider everything, but facing down 16 points of damage, he has to do something. But I don't think it's going to be enough to beat what's in Nias' hand, and this is elimination match for Luchesi here.
Oh, that's it. The patron, Emperor Thaurissan comes down. And
that's not going to be enough. Nias just has more than enough damage on board.
Well, he needs 1 card from hand, but he's got it.
Yeah, and I mean, we can just see it. It's right there. Nias is going to beat Luchesi 3-1 and secure his spot. Playing off this later today, he's playing for that regional spot now.
Yeah, and Luchesi, unfortunately, despite playing really well, Luchesi's going to go ahead and concede it up, and that is it. Nias is going to continue on his road to the Americas Championship. Before we get into, talking about how Nias won that series, I want to say, hats off to Luchesi. I think more than a lot of the players I've seen here, I think a lot of his reads were just spot on. It just never ended up working out. I don't know if it was something to do with the decks he brought. Maybe he just didn't end up in the spots he wanted to be in, but he played really tight Hearthstone, and I really am kind of sad to see him out here.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, and kind of touching on what Chalky said earlier, being a pro at this level is really about how do you get those wins when you don't have the best hand possible, when you do have those average hands, those slightly below average hands. Luchesi, in the matches that I saw, felt like he was working with a lot of those hands that had a lot of utility and not really a ton of action to go with it. So just his options very restricted, and still, despite that, finding great ways to put himself in positions to win games. And so, sad to see him go. I think Luchesi was one of my favorites, actually, kind of watching this tournament, one of my favorite players to watch. But, you got to be proud of yourself for making it to this far anyway.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that, if he keeps persevering and going on in professional Hearthstone, you could see him later in more tournaments finishing in these top spots. He's not going to move on to regionals, but this was a high finish. For Nias, though, 1 win away from that regional championship. This is a guy who came from the last call qualifier, came in with basically no expectations, lost in first round. People kind of write you off at that point, and now he's right here.
And that's got to be a great feeling for him. Just as you said, came through the last call qualifier, had lost his first round in here, and been beating some of the better players, I think, in this event. What do you think he's thinking at this stage of the situation? Now he's 1 win away. At the beginning of this, he might have been feeling like, it looks like it's going to be an early exit.
Yeah, I'm sure Nias is actually thinking at the moment, no warrior, no problem. He just continues to win. That Dragon Priest is doing work for him, and I like the fact that he kind of teched it to deal with Patron, deal with maybe Controller. And, as I've said before, it's not necessarily just for those decks. That gives him a great thing against Hunter, gives him a great option against Paladins. There's a lot of reason to bring Acidic Swampoos, and I'm very impressed with Nias. And I got to say, he's kind of someone I really want to see make the Americas Championship now, especially since he is running that Dragon Priest.
Yeah, basically just want to echo what Rob said. This is a guy I think you can look out for. He's going to be facing off against the winner of the next match for a spot at regionals. I think he's definitely someone people have kind of slept on looking at the lower bracket, and now he's right here. I think he has a really solid shot to head to regionals.
And speaking of our next match, it's coming up right after the short break we're going to be taking. It's Bloodyface versus Strelzik. Again, 2 more guys. Kind of the unknown players really fighting for a lot of these spots. But, like we said, at this time last year, Firebat was one of those guys as well. He was not much a known player, not really much going on. Suddenly he was the world champion. Bloodyface took down Reynad in this event, and Strelzik, he's had a tough road to get to this point as well.
Yeah, Strelzik just, up until yesterday, just kept winning. Mage seems to be his preferred class, and he's done a lot with it. And again, I love how much passion he has in his games. You can tell this means a lot to him. He gets very, very excited, and even when he, loses or when the unstable portals don't go his way, he's extremely excited. He's obviously very much enjoying this road.
Yeah, and for Bloodyface, just another player that kind of got knocked down in the lower bracket earlier than he would have liked, has moved through it, and he's had matches where it's just seemed like he was on his way out. The match against Reynad, he was so down in that Druid versus Patron Game 5, just looked unrecoverable with Reynad sitting at 50 and up health, and managed to, stick in it, think, maybe there's a chance. And there was a chance. He ended up making a huge comeback and securing his spot today.
So 2 of our lesser-known players going to be battling it off next round to find out who's going to be moving on and still have a shot to secure their spot at the Americas Championship. So we're going to a short break, but when we come back, we're going to get right underway into that match. Don't go anywhere, guys. From the ESO studios here in Burbank, California, right after the break, more Hearthstone.